The average lifespan of industrial mining equipment is 15 to 20 years, but nearly 40% of catastrophic failures occur without warning, costing companies an estimated $38 billion annually in downtime alone. Most people don't think about the machines that extract the copper for their phones or the coal that powers their homes. But I'd spent 37 years thinking about nothing else. Mechanical engineers like me understand that everything, from the smallest bearing to the largest excavator, speaks a language of vibration, temperature, and stress. If you know how to listen, machines tell you when they're about to die. But apparently nobody was interested in listening to me anymore, especially not my family. And certainly not on Christmas. I thought I'd seen every kind of cold in my 68 years, but nothing prepared me for the chill in Sarah's voice when she sat across from me at our ranch kitchen table last Tuesday morning. The Wind River Range stretched white and brutal through the window behind her, December wind rattling the old glass panes, but her words cut deeper than any Wyoming winter. David, I think it's best if you stay here this Christmas. The family's going to Jackson Hole without you. My coffee cup stopped halfway to my lips. What do you mean, without me? She wouldn't look at me, just stared at her hands, twisted around her mug like she was trying to strangle it. Her wedding ring caught the morning light, the same ring I'd put on her finger 43 years ago in Laramie, when we were young and stupid and thought love conquered everything. Michael thinks, we all think, it would be easier if you weren't there this year. You've been so difficult lately. Difficult. There it was again. That word had been following me around like a shadow for the past year, ever since I'd retired from Bailey Mechanical Solutions. 37 years designing heavy equipment systems for mining operations across the Rockies, and now I was difficult. Difficult how? I asked, though I could already hear the list forming in her head. At Thanksgiving, you argued with Michael about his consulting business. At Rachel's birthday, you said her fiancé's startup was chasing vapor. The kids are tired of walking on eggshells around you. Michael was our son, 39, divorced, working as a sustainability consultant in Denver. Rachel was 35, our daughter, a marketing director for a tech company in Boulder. Good kids. We'd raised them right, I thought. Taught them to work hard, think critically, question everything. Maybe I'd done too good a job on that last part. Michael asked my opinion, I said, keeping my voice level. He wanted to know what I thought about carbon credit trading. I told him the truth. The market's oversaturated and underregulated. You told him he was wasting his education, Sarah corrected, her voice sharp as January ice. And you called Rachel's fiancé's renewable energy company a greenwashing scheme. Because it is. They're selling solar installations with equipment that'll fail in 5 years. I know bad engineering when I see it. Would you rather I lied to them? Sarah's sigh could have put out the wood stove in the corner. That's exactly what I mean, David. You can't just support them. Everything has to be your way, your assessment, your judgment. Can't you just be happy for them? I looked at the woman I'd loved since 1981. We'd met at the University of Wyoming, both of us engineering students when that was still unusual for women in Wyoming. She'd switched to education after 2 years, said she wanted to work with people instead of machines. We'd married young, Built this ranch together piece by piece on weekends and summers. 3 kids, 42 acres in the foothills, a life carved out of hard work and harder winters. I designed mining equipment that moved mountains. Literally. Excavators the size of houses, drill systems that could punch through granite like butter, conveyor networks that transported millions of tons of ore across miles of hostile terrain. My work kept people employed, kept the lights on across 6 states, kept the country running, and now I couldn't even come to Christmas. So that's it, I said. 43 years and I'm uninvited. It's not forever, just this year. Give everyone some space. She reached across the table like she might take my hand, then pulled back like she'd thought better of it. Maybe you could spend it with your brother in Montana. Cal would love to see you. My brother Cal lived in Missoula. We talked maybe twice a year, usually about elk hunting or the Broncos. The last time I'd seen him was at our mother's funeral 3 years ago. We'd stood in the snow at the cemetery, said the things brothers say at funerals, then gone our separate ways. Right, I said. The conversation was over. Sarah stood up, carried her mug to the sink, rinsed it with the same methodical care she brought to everything. 43 years, and I could still predict her every movement in this kitchen. She'd built this space, made it hers. The curtains, the dishes, the herbs growing in pots on the windowsill. All Sarah. I was just a guest here now. She left for town an hour later. Some committee meeting at the church. She didn't ask if I wanted to come. We both knew I didn't. That night, I lay awake while Sarah slept beside me. The house creaked in the wind, that particular grown old ranch houses make when the temperature drops below 0. Outside, the Wind River Range stood like sentinels in the darkness, ancient and indifferent to human problems. I thought about all the Christmases in Jackson Hole, the family tradition we'd started when Michael was 6 years old, the snow, the lodge fireplace, Sarah's famous elk stew, the kids opening presents on Christmas morning, and in recent years the grandkids, Michael's 2 boys, Rachel's daughter, learning to ski, building snowmen, their laughter filling rooms that had once held only our own children's voices. And now I was being cut out of it, like a tumor, excised, removed, for everyone else's comfort. I could have fought it, could have argued, insisted, demanded my place at the table, could have reminded them that I'd paid for half those Jackson Hole trips, that I'd been there for every Christmas since 1987, that family meant showing up even when things were difficult. But I wouldn't. I wouldn't beg for an invitation to spend Christmas with people who clearly didn't want me there. I had that much pride left. So I'd stay at the ranch, alone. For the first time in 43 years, the wind howled, Sarah slept, and I stared at the ceiling, wondering when exactly I'd become the problem nobody wanted to solve. The next morning, Sarah had already left when I woke up. There was a note on the counter, her handwriting neat and precise as always. Quilting circle in town. Back by dinner. There's coffee. I poured myself a cup and stood at the kitchen window, watching the sun climb over the Wind River Range. The snow had that particular sparkle it gets in December, like someone had scattered diamonds across the landscape, beautiful and cold and indifferent. I finished my coffee, rinsed the cup, Sarah's training ran deep and headed downstairs. The basement was the only place that still felt like mine. The house had slowly transformed over the years into Sarah's domain, decorated with her taste, organized by her rules. Throw pillows that served no purpose, candles that were never lit, family photos arranged just so on the mantel, but the basement was mine. Tools, half-finished projects, schematics spread across work tables, and my bank of computer monitors glowing in the corner like the cockpit of some alien spacecraft. I'd been spending more time down here lately, more time than was probably healthy, according to Sarah. But down here, nobody sighed when I spoke. Nobody rolled their eyes at my opinions. The machines didn't judge. They just worked or didn't work, and if they didn't work, you figured out why and fixed them. I sat down at my main workstation, 3 monitors arranged in a semicircle, and pulled up the files I'd been working on. Lines of code scrolled across the screens. Data visualizations showing stress patterns and failure predictions. Neural network architectures that would have looked like gibberish to anyone else. But to me, they were beautiful. I'd been working on this for 9 months now, something nobody in the family knew about. They probably wouldn't have cared if they did. To them, I was just old David tinkering in his cave, avoiding real life, playing on the computer like a child, instead of accepting that retirement meant slowly fading into irrelevance. But this was real, more real than anything I'd done in years. It had started last March at a mining equipment expo in Denver. I'd only gone because I was bored, because sitting at home watching Sarah rearrange furniture was driving me insane, because I needed to feel like I still belonged to the world I'd spent my entire adult life building. That's where I ran into James Peterson. James and I had worked together back in the 90s, both of us young engineers convinced we were going to revolutionize the mining industry. He'd left Bailey Mechanical about 10 years ago, moved into tech consulting, working with startups on automation and AI integration. We'd kept in touch sporadically. Christmas cards, the occasional email when one of us saw something interesting in the trade journals. We'd grabbed drinks after the expo, found a quiet bar away from the convention center crowds. James looked good for 63. Still had that energy that made you want to listen when he talked about engineering problems. Biggest problem in mining automation, he'd said, gesturing with his bourbon, is equipment failure prediction. Companies lose millions in downtime because their systems can't accurately predict mechanical failures before they happen. The vibration analysis tools out there are garbage. Too many false positives, not enough real-time processing capability. I'd nodded. I knew this intimately. I'd spent 37 years dealing with exactly this problem. Someone needs to build a better system, James had continued. Something that combines real-time sensor data with machine learning to predict failures with actual accuracy. Not just, this bearing might fail sometime in the next 6 months, but this bearing will fail in 2 weeks if you don't replace it now. Could save the industry billions. He'd said it casually, already moving on to complaining about his golf game and the Denver traffic. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. Because I knew something James didn't know. Something almost nobody knew anymore. Back in the late 90s, when I was working on heavy equipment for the Kemmerer coal operation in southwestern Wyoming, I'd developed a vibration analysis methodology. Nothing fancy, just a systematic way of correlating mechanical stress patterns with failure modes. I'd studied how different types of failures produced different vibration signatures, how temperature changes affected those signatures, how you could predict with surprising accuracy when a component was approaching critical failure. It had worked so well they'd used it for years afterward. Reduced downtime by 40%, saved the operation millions in avoided catastrophic failures. But it was analog, limited by the technology of the time, paper charts, manual measurements, human analysis. The company owned the methodology, and eventually, as new digital systems emerged, it was forgotten, filed away in some archive, replaced by inferior but more modern solutions that looked better in PowerPoint presentations. But I still had the principles, the framework, the methodology, and I'd been thinking for years about how to modernize it, how to take what I knew about mechanical failure and combine it with the kind of computing power that simply hadn't existed in 1998. After that conversation with James, I'd started working, really working. I taught myself Python first, spending hours watching YouTube tutorials and reading documentation, feeling ridiculous and exhilarated in equal measure. Then neural networks, machine learning algorithms, IoT sensor integration, edge computing architecture. I read everything I could find about modern predictive maintenance systems, studied their weaknesses, understood why they failed. Sarah thought I was just playing on the computer. She'd say it to her friends at church, at her quilting circle, at the grocery store. Oh, David's teaching himself to code. It's sweet, really. Keeps him occupied. The kids made jokes when they called. "How's the programming going, Dad? Built the next Facebook yet?" Michael had said that at Thanksgiving, right before we'd gotten into the argument about carbon credits. Rachel had laughed, sent me a meme about old people using computers. They didn't understand. They thought I was just an old man trying to stay relevant, unable to accept that my time had passed. But I was building something. A predictive maintenance platform specifically designed for heavy mining equipment. An AI-driven system that could analyze vibration, temperature, pressure, and acoustic data in real time. Data from IoT sensors that could be retrofitted onto existing equipment and predict mechanical failures with 95% accuracy, up to 2 weeks before they happened. 2 weeks. That was the key. Not sometime soon, but exactly 14 days from now, this hydraulic pump will fail. Time enough to order parts, schedule maintenance, avoid catastrophic downtime, time enough to save millions. I pulled up the latest test results on my center monitor. I'd been running the system against historical failure data from my old projects, data I still had access to through professional networks and archived reports. The accuracy was remarkable. In simulation after simulation, the system identified failures an average of 13.7 days before they occurred. The false positive rate was under 3%. The false negative rate, failures the system missed, was under 2%. It was better than anything on the market, better than systems being developed by companies with 50-person engineering teams and venture capital funding. And I'd built it alone, in my basement, at 68 years old, while my family thought I was having some kind of pathetic late-life crisis. I leaned back in my chair, looking at the screens, at the code I'd written. at the architecture diagrams spread across my work tables. Nobody in the family knew about this. They wouldn't have cared if they did, but they would care. Eventually, they'd care very much. By November, 8 months into the project, I had a working prototype. It wasn't pretty. The interface looked like something from the early 2000s, all basic fonts and utilitarian color schemes. The code was probably inefficient in places. I'm sure a 25-year-old software engineer from Silicon Valley would have had a heart attack looking at some of my nested loops. But it worked. God, it worked. I spent 2 weeks running tests, feeding the system historical failure data from projects I'd worked on over the years. The Kemmerer coal operation, the copper mine outside Butte, the phosphate extraction facility in southwestern Idaho. Decades of equipment failures, all documented, all time-stamped, all perfect, for testing a predictive system. The results were staggering. In simulation after simulation, the system identified failures before they happened, not vague warnings but specific predictions. Bearing failure in conveyor system 3, 14 days. Hydraulic pump degradation in excavator 7, 10 days. Gear tooth fracture in crusher 2, 12 days. I ran the numbers 3 times because I couldn't believe them. Over a 5-year span across 4 major operations, the system would have prevented 87% of catastrophic failures. 87%. That translated to roughly $40 million in avoided downtime, not counting the prevented injuries, the saved equipment, the maintained production schedules. The system analyzed real-time data from multiple sensor types: vibration monitors, temperature gauges, pressure sensors, acoustic pickups, and ran them through neural networks I'd trained on decades of failure patterns. It understood that a bearing didn't just fail randomly. It failed because of specific, measurable degradation over time. It failed in ways that left signatures, if you knew how to read them. And I'd spent 37 years learning how to read them. For the first time in years, maybe decades, I felt truly alive. Not content, not comfortable, alive, the way I'd felt when I was 30 and designing my first major mining system, when every day brought new problems to solve, and I had the energy and arrogance to believe I could solve them all. Upstairs, Sarah was decorating for Christmas. I could hear her moving furniture, the soft thud of boxes being brought down from the attic. She'd asked me to help hang the outdoor lights last week, and I'd told her I was busy. She'd given me that look, the one that said she was disappointed but not surprised, and hired the neighbor's teenage son to do it instead. She didn't understand that I was building something important down here. She didn't ask, and I didn't tell her. The contrast wasn't lost on me. So upstairs, preparing for a holiday I wasn't invited to attend. Me, downstairs, building a future she didn't know existed. I called James Peterson in mid-November, asked if he wanted to grab coffee next time he was in Wyoming. He said he could drive up to Cheyenne the following week. He had a client meeting in Fort Collins anyway. We met at a diner off Interstate 25, the kind of place with vinyl booths and coffee that tasted like it had been sitting on the burner since the Carter administration. James looked the same as he had in March, maybe a little more gray around the temples. "So what's going on?" he asked after we'd ordered. "You sounded mysterious on the phone." Remember that conversation we had back in March? I said. About predictive maintenance for mining equipment? Sure. At the expo. I was complaining about how nobody solved the failure prediction problem. Right. I pulled out my laptop, set it on the table between us. I've been tinkering with something. I'd prepared a demonstration, a simple walkthrough of the system using data from the camera operation. I showed him how the interface worked, how you could track multiple pieces of equipment simultaneously, how the predictions updated in real time as new sensor data came in. James didn't say anything. He just stared at the screen, his coffee cooling in his hand. I walked him through a case study, a conveyor system that had suffered a catastrophic bearing failure in 2003, shutting down operations for 4 days and costing the company $2.3 million. I showed him how my system, running on the historical data leading up to that failure, had identified the problem 13 days in advance. Plenty of time to order parts and schedule maintenance during a planned downtime. 10 minutes passed. James still hadn't said anything. James, I said, you all right? He looked up at me slowly, and there was something in his eyes I'd never seen before. He looked at me like he was seeing a ghost, or maybe like he was seeing someone he'd never really known. David, he said, his voice strange. Do you understand what this is? I shrugged. A predictive maintenance platform, like we talked about. No. He shook his head, still staring at the laptop screen. This is a 9-figure idea. This could revolutionize mining operations globally. The accuracy you're showing here. David, this is beyond anything I've seen from companies with 50-person engineering teams and series funding. He looked back at me. How long have you been working on this? 9 months, give or take. James laughed, but it wasn't a normal laugh. It was shocked, almost breathless, like someone had punched him in the chest. You built this in 9 months, by yourself. It's not that complicated once you understand the core principles. David, he cut me off. You're 68 years old. You taught yourself machine learning. You built an AI-driven predictive maintenance system that outperforms anything on the market. Do you understand how insane that is? I felt something warm spreading through my chest. Pride, maybe, or vindication. The core principles were already solid, I said. I developed the methodology back in the 90s. I just needed to translate them into modern technology. James leaned back in the booth, still looking at me like I'd just told him I could fly. David, I know people. Venture capital firms specializing in industrial tech. Companies that invest in exactly this kind of thing. Can I show this to them? I thought about Sarah upstairs, hanging Christmas decorations for a holiday I wouldn't attend. I thought about Michael's jokes about teaching old dogs new tricks. I thought about Rachel's laughter when I'd mentioned learning Python. What did I have to lose? My family already thought I was obsolete. Sure, I said. Why not? James pulled out his phone immediately, started typing notes, asked me technical questions I answered while our coffee got cold. He was excited now, animated in a way I hadn't seen since we were both young engineers who believed we could change the world. Maybe we still could. That was 3 weeks ago. And now, sitting in my basement workshop on a cold December morning, waiting for Sarah to come home from her quilting circle, I pulled up the email James had sent last night. The subject line read, Frontier Industrial Ventures wants to meet. Next week. David, I think this is really happening. I stared at the screen, at those words, at the possibility they represented. My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. Staying in town for lunch with Linda. Home by 3. I texted back. Okay. Then I opened James's email and started reading about the company that wanted to buy my future. James moved fast. Within 48 hours of our coffee meeting in Cheyenne, he'd connected me with Frontier Industrial Ventures, a firm based in Denver that specialized in mining technology investments. They had a portfolio of companies working on automation, AI integration, safety systems, exactly the space where my platform would fit. They're aggressive, James warned me over the phone. They move quickly when they see something they want. Be prepared for a lot of questions. The first meeting was in early December, in a glass-walled conference room on the 20th floor of a building in downtown Denver. 5 people sat across from me. 2 partners, a chief technology officer, a mining operations specialist, and someone whose title I never quite caught, but who seemed to be there just to look skeptical. I'd driven down the day before, stayed in a hotel that cost more per night than our monthly utility bill at the ranch. Sarah thought I was visiting an old colleague. Not technically a lie. They asked technical questions first. How did the neural networks process the sensor data? What was the latency between data collection and prediction output? How did the system handle edge cases where multiple failure modes might present similar signatures? I answered them all. 37 years of expertise flowing out of me like water from a cracked dam. I knew this industry better than most people half my age. I'd been solving these problems since before some of them were born. Their excitement grew with each answer. I could see it in their faces, the way they leaned forward, the way they started asking follow-up questions faster than I could finish my previous answers. Then came the market questions. What was the total addressable market? How would we price the system? What were the barriers to adoption? I'd already thought through all of this. The global mining equipment market was worth hundreds of billions. My system could be retrofitted onto existing equipment. No need to replace entire fleets. The ROI was obvious. Spend a few $100,000 on sensors and software, save millions in avoided downtime. Any mining operation that looked at the numbers would want it. What about implementation? The CTO asked. How do you see deployment working in practice? I walked them through it. Sensor installation protocols. Data integration with existing SCADA systems. Training requirements for maintenance teams. Phased rollout strategies to minimize disruption. I'd been thinking about this for months, running scenarios in my head while Sarah slept beside me, while I sat alone at dinner, while I worked in my basement kingdom. The meeting lasted 4 hours. When it ended, the senior partner, a woman named Catherine Reed, who'd made her fortune in mining automation, shook my hand and said, "We'll be in touch very soon." They were in touch the next day. More meetings followed, some in person, some via video calls from my basement while Sarah was out shopping or at her church committee meetings. Each time, they dug deeper. Each time, I had answers. 3 weeks into December, Catherine called me directly. "David, we'd like to make an offer. Are you available to come to Denver tomorrow?" The offer was staggering. $9.5 million for the initial acquisition of the technology and intellectual property. I'd be brought on as chief technical advisor, working with their engineering team to refine and deploy the system. Salary, benefits, equity stake in the operating company they'd form around the platform. And if the system performed as projected, if it achieved the accuracy and cost savings I'd demonstrated, performance bonuses over the next 4 years could push the total compensation to $25 million. I sat in that conference room, looking at the term sheet, and felt dizzy. $25 million for something I'd built in my basement while my family thought I was playing on the computer. "We'd like to move quickly," Catherine said. "We want to announce before year-end, create momentum going into the new year." "How quickly?" "Contracts finalized by December 26th. Public announcement that evening. Does that work for you?" December 26th, Boxing Day, the day after Christmas, while my family would be at Jackson Hole, opening presents and eating Sarah's elk stew, and not missing me at all. "That works," I said. I should have told Sarah. I should have driven home that evening, sat her down at the kitchen table, and explained everything. Showed her what I'd been working on, what it meant, what was about to happen. I thought about it, rehearsed the conversation in my head during the drive back to the ranch. "Hey, Sarah, remember how you think I'm difficult and out of touch? Well, I just built something that might change an entire industry. Oh, see, and I'm about to become a multimillionaire. Surprise." She'd think I was having delusions, or a breakdown, or both. I thought about telling the kids, calling Michael, explaining to him that his old man wasn't wasting his education, wasn't obsolete, wasn't just some difficult relic who couldn't adapt to the modern world. But I remembered Thanksgiving dinner. Michael had been talking about his consulting work, about carbon credit markets and sustainability initiatives. I'd pointed out the regulatory problems, the market oversaturation, the companies gaming the system. I'd been trying to help him understand the pitfalls. "Dad, you just don't get it," he'd said, that patient condescension in his voice. "This is the future. Maybe your generation did things differently, but we have to adapt, my generation." Like I was some dinosaur who couldn't understand the modern world. I remembered Rachel's birthday party in October. Her fiancé, Brandon, had cornered me, excited to talk about his renewable energy startup. They were installing solar systems, he said, democratizing clean energy. I'd looked at the spec sheets he'd shown me on his phone. Cheap Chinese panels with known degradation issues. Inverters that would fail in 3 to 5 years. Installation protocols that violated basic electrical engineering principles. "This equipment won't last," I'd told him, trying to be gentle about it. "You're setting up your customers for failures and expensive repairs." He'd laughed, actually laughed. "With all due respect, Mr. Bailey, the solar industry has evolved a lot. These are cutting-edge systems." Cutting-edge junk, I'd thought. But I'd kept my mouth shut after that. Later, Rachel had pulled Sarah aside. I'd overheard them in the kitchen. "Mom, can you please talk to Dad? He's embarrassing. Brandon's worked really hard on this business." Each memory reinforced why I was keeping quiet. They didn't respect my expertise. They didn't value my opinion. Why would they believe me about this? The gossip reached me in mid-December, delivered by Tom Morrison when I ran into him at the hardware store in town. Tom's wife Linda was in Sarah's quilting circle. "Hey, David," Tom said, lowering his voice like he was sharing classified information. "Linda mentions Sarah's worried about you. Says you're spending all your time in the basement, learning computer stuff. She thinks maybe you're going through a late-life crisis or something." A late-life crisis. That's what Sarah was telling people, that her husband, who'd spent nearly 4 decades as a successful engineer, was having some kind of breakdown because he couldn't accept retirement. "I'm fine, Tom," I said. "Just keeping busy." Sure. We all need hobbies. Linda's taken up watercolors. Terrible at it, but she enjoys it." He'd patted my shoulder like I was a child who needed reassurance. I worked with Frontier's lawyers, signing non-disclosure agreements, reviewing contracts, setting up the corporate structure, all of it done via video calls and encrypted emails. Sarah never asked what I was doing in the basement. She'd stopped asking months ago. The finalization date was set, December 26th. The announcement would go out that evening. Press release, media kit, interviews with trade publications. Catherine wanted it coordinated for maximum impact. "We're positioning this as a major breakthrough," she said during one of our final calls. "Wyoming engineer revolutionizes mining technology. It's a great story." The irony wasn't lost on me. The announcement would hit while my family was at Jackson Hole. While Sarah was serving dinner, I wouldn't eat. While Michael and Rachel were exchanging gifts with their kids. While I sat alone at the ranch they'd exiled me from. They'd find out the same way everyone else would. From news alerts on their phones. From friends texting them. From the sudden, unavoidable reality that the difficult old man they'd dismissed had built something extraordinary while they weren't paying attention. I kept quiet, worked with the lawyers, signed the papers, set up the deal, and waited for Christmas to arrive. Sarah left on December 23rd, her SUV loaded with presents wrapped in paper I'd never seen her buy. Food containers stacked in coolers, her overnight bag tucked carefully in the back. She'd been packing for 2 days, making lists, checking them twice like some ironic Santa Claus preparing for a holiday I wasn't invited to. I stood in the driveway while she did a final check, her breath visible in the cold morning air. The Wind River Range loomed behind us, indifferent witnesses to this quiet dissolution of 43 years of family tradition. "I wish you'd reconsider," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "There's still time. You could follow me down tomorrow." "I'm fine here," I said. "David, Sarah, we both know how this works. I'm not going to show up uninvited to my own family Christmas. I won't do that to them. Or to myself." She nodded slowly, and for just a moment, I saw something in her face. Regret, maybe, or guilt, or just exhaustion with the whole situation. But it passed quickly, replaced by that careful neutrality she'd perfected over the past year. "The neighbor boy will check on the horses," she said. "I left instructions on the counter." "I know. You told me yesterday." "Right." She climbed into the SUV, started the engine. Through the windshield, I could see her mouth moving, probably checking her mental list one more time. Then she backed out of the driveway, gave me a small wave, and headed toward the county road that would take her to the interstate, to Jackson Hole, to the family Christmas that would happen without me. I watched until her taillights disappeared around the bend, then went back inside, to the empty house. Christmas Eve passed slowly. I worked in the basement most of the day, running final checks on the system, reviewing the documentation Frontier's legal team had requested. The contract signing was scheduled for tomorrow at 10 a.m. Mountain Time, to be followed by the public announcement at 6 p.m. My phone rang around 7 in the evening. Michael. "Hey, Dad." His voice carried that forced cheerfulness people use when they're trying to make something awkward feel normal. "Just wanted to check in. Merry Christmas." "Merry Christmas, son. You doing okay? Mom said you decided to stay at the ranch." Decided. That was one way to put it. Like I'd had a choice. Like I'd been the one who chose this isolation rather than having it chosen for me. "I'm fine," I said. "How's Jackson Hole?" "Good. Snow's perfect. The kids are excited. Rachel's here with Brandon. They send their love." Did they? I doubted that. But I appreciated Michael's effort to maintain the fiction that this was all normal, all fine, all just a temporary adjustment, rather than what it actually was. My family deciding I was too difficult to include. "That's good," I said. "Enjoy it." "Yeah." Awkward silence filled the line between us. 800 miles of distance and something much wider than geography. "Maybe next year, right? Maybe we can all do this together again." "Maybe," I said, though we both knew maybe meant probably not. After we hung up, I poured myself 3 fingers of Wyoming whiskey, a local distillery Sarah had bought from last winter, and sat in my workshop. The basement was warm, the computers humming their electronic lullaby, the familiar smell of solder and machine oil providing a comfort the empty house above couldn't offer. The house was decorated. Sarah had insisted on it before she left, had spent 2 days hanging garland and arranging the nativity scene and stringing lights on the tree. It looked like a museum exhibit now. Traditional American Christmas, circa 2024. Perfect and lifeless and utterly meaningless. I thought I'd be angry, bitter, resentful, sitting here alone on Christmas Eve at 68 years old, uninvited from my own family gathering. It should have filled me with rage. But mostly I just felt calm, peaceful even. For the first time in months, nobody was disappointed in me. Nobody was sighing when I spoke. Nobody was exchanging glances over my head when I offered an opinion. Nobody was treating me like a problem that needed to be managed, or a relic that needed to be tolerated. It was just me, my thoughts, my work, and the wind howling across the high plains outside. Christmas Day arrived with fresh snow. I woke early, old habits from 4 decades of early morning shifts, and made coffee in the too-quiet kitchen. Through the window I could see the Wind River Range painted white and gold by the rising sun. Beautiful, indifferent, eternal. I spent most of the day in the basement, working on technical specifications. The system was solid, but I wanted everything perfect for tomorrow. Frontier was paying $9.5 million for this. They deserved perfection. Around noon, I made myself a turkey and cranberry sandwich. Sri had left sandwich makings in the refrigerator, her last concession to the fact that I'd be spending the holiday alone. I ate at my workbench, scrolling through code on one monitor while reviewing sensor deployment protocols on another. Tradition still mattered, even if family didn't. The evening passed slowly. I reviewed the contract one final time, checked my email for any last-minute changes from Frontier's legal team. Nothing. Everything was in place. Tomorrow at 10 a.m., I'd sign the papers via DocuSign. Tomorrow at 6 p.m., the world would know what I'd built. I thought about Michael and Rachel at Jackson Hole, opening presents with the grandkids, Sarah's elk stew for dinner, the fireplace crackling, everyone warm and together and relieved that I wasn't there to make things difficult. I thought about what their phones would show them tomorrow evening, the news alerts, the headlines, the numbers. Midnight approached. I sat in my workshop, whiskey glass empty, computer monitors glowing. The house creaked around me, old wood contracting in the December cold. Outside, snow fell again, soft and steady, covering the world in white silence. 68 years old, spending Christmas alone. About to become a multimillionaire, I'd designed mining equipment that moved mountains. Raised 3 children who thought I was obsolete. Built a marriage that had slowly eroded into polite distance. And now, in what Sarah's quilting circle probably thought was a pathetic late-life crisis, I'd built something that would change an entire industry. The clock on my computer ticked toward midnight. 11:57, 11:58, 11:59. Christmas was ending. Boxing Day was beginning. And with it, everything would change. 12:01 a.m. My phone rang. Michael. I stared at the screen for 2 rings, 3. Why was he calling after midnight? Was something wrong? Had someone been hurt? I answered. Michael. Dad. His voice was wrong, higher than usual, shaking, almost panicked. My heart started racing. What's wrong? Is everyone okay? Dad, what the hell is going on? I stood up from my chair, confusion mixing with concern. What are you talking about? Your name is on the news. He sounded breathless, like he'd been running. The Denver Post app just sent a notification. It says, Dad, it says David Bailey, Wyoming mechanical engineer, sells revolutionary mining technology platform to Frontier Industrial Ventures for... He stopped. I could hear him breathing, could imagine him staring at his phone in disbelief. Dad, it says $9.5 million. The basement seemed to contract around me. I sat back down slowly, my hand gripping the edge of the workbench. Dad, is this real? I looked at my monitors, at the code I'd written, at the system that had consumed 9 months of my life while my family thought I was wasting time. It's real, I said. You sold something for $9.5 million. Michael's voice had that quality of someone who just watched reality break in front of them. I could hear noise in the background, voices, movement, someone asking what was wrong. Initial acquisition, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. There's more if performance targets are met. Could be up to $25 million over 4 years. Silence on the other end. Complete, absolute silence. I could picture him standing there in the Jackson Hole Lodge, phone pressed to his ear, trying to process what I'd just said. My son, the sustainability consultant with the master's degree from Colorado State, who'd made jokes about teaching old dogs new tricks, who'd laughed when I said I was learning Python. 25. His voice broke. Dad, I don't understand. What is this? What did you build? A predictive maintenance platform for mining equipment. AI-driven. Real-time failure prediction with 95% accuracy. I've been working on it for 9 months. 9 months. He repeated it like the words were in a foreign language. You've been working on this for 9 months? Since March. After I ran into James Peterson at that expo in Denver. More silence. Then, I need to call you back. Click. Dial tone. I sat there in my basement workshop, phone in my hand, the fluorescent lights humming overhead. The clock on my computer read 12:04 a.m. 4 minutes into Boxing Day, 4 minutes into the rest of my life. My phone buzzed. A text from Rachel. Dad, what is happening? Then another buzz. Sarah. David, Michael just called. He says you sold something. For millions. Please call me. Another buzz. A number I didn't recognize. Mr. Bailey, this is Jennifer Chen from Wyoming Public Radio. We'd love to interview you about your technology sale. The flood began. My phone started ringing again before I could finish reading Sarah's text. Michael. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again immediately. Rachel this time. Voicemail. Then Sarah. Then a number with a Denver area code. Then Michael again. Text messages poured in like water through a cracked dam. 47 in the first hour. Old colleagues from Bailey Mechanical Solutions. Engineers I'd worked with on projects 15 years ago. Tom Morrison from town. Probably woken up by Linda, who'd gotten a call from Sarah. Even my brother Cal in Montana. Did you really sell something for $10 million? Call me. Voicemails piled up. 12 messages in 30 minutes. I could see them accumulating on my screen, each notification a small earthquake in what had been my carefully controlled silence. Michael's second message. Dad, please pick up. We need to talk about this. I'm sorry, please, call me back. Rachel's. Dad, I'm looking at the news right now. They're calling you a pioneering innovator and saying your platform could revolutionize the mining industry. Dad, why didn't you tell us? Sarah's. David, I'm driving back. I'll be home tomorrow afternoon. We need to talk. A journalist from the Denver Post. Mr. Bailey, we're running a feature story on your breakthrough. Could we schedule a time to speak? Another from Mining Technology Journal. Sir, we'd like to interview you about the technical specifications of your platform. I sat in my workshop chair, watching my phone buzz and vibrate like an angry hornet, the screen lighting up again and again with names and numbers and notifications. The basement felt smaller suddenly, the walls pressing in. The comfortable isolation I'd built over 9 months cracking open like an egg. This was what I'd wanted, wasn't it? Vindication. Validation. Proof that I wasn't obsolete, wasn't difficult, wasn't just some old man having a late-life crisis in his basement. But now that it was here, now that the news was out and the phone wouldn't stop ringing, and my family was finally paying attention, I wasn't sure what I felt. My phone rang again. Michael. 9th time. I answered. Dad, Michael, I need you to stop calling for a minute. But Dad, we need to talk about this, about everything. I'm so sorry. I had no idea you were working on something so... Michael. I kept my voice level. I know you're shocked. I know you have questions, but I'm not ready to have this conversation yet. Not tonight. Not like this. But tomorrow. We'll talk tomorrow. All of you. But right now I need you to give me some space. I could hear him breathing on the other end. Behind him, voices, Sarah's, Rachel's, someone else I couldn't identify. "Okay," he said finally. "Okay. But Dad, I'm sorry. For everything. For not taking you seriously. For not—" "Tomorrow," I said again. "We'll talk tomorrow." I hung up before he could respond. The phone immediately started buzzing again. I turned off the ringer, watched the screen light up silently with incoming calls and texts, like watching a storm through a window, violent but distant, unable to touch me if I chose to stay inside. I looked at my computer monitors, the code I'd written, the system architecture diagrams, the test results showing 95% accuracy. 9 months of work, 9 months of being dismissed, being called difficult, being told I was having a crisis instead of building a future. And now they knew. The whole world knew, or at least the part of the world that cared about mining technology and industrial innovation and 68-year-old engineers who refused to accept obsolescence. I felt vindicated. Of course I did. After a year of being treated like I didn't matter, like my expertise was outdated and my opinions were burdens. Of course, vindication felt good, but it felt complicated too, tangled up with anger and hurt and a bitter satisfaction that I didn't particularly like in myself. They believed in me now because of the money, because of the news alerts, because external validation had finally forced them to see what they should have seen all along. My phone buzzed silently. Another text, another voicemail, another journalist, another colleague, another person who suddenly wanted to talk to the difficult old man who turned out to be worth $9.5 million. I wasn't ready to talk. Not yet. Not to any of them. I opened my email instead. Found the message from Catherine Reed at Frontier Industrial Ventures, sent at exactly 6 p.m. as planned. Contract executed. Announcement live. Welcome to the team, David. The future starts now. The future. I was 68 years old. My wife was driving back from a family Christmas I'd been uninvited from. My children were probably still standing in that Jackson Hole lodge, staring at their phones, trying to reconcile the father they thought they knew with the man in the news headlines. And I was sitting in my basement workshop, surrounded by the evidence of 9 months of work that nobody had bothered to ask about, feeling vindicated and angry and satisfied and hurt all at once. My phone buzzed again. The screen lit up. Sarah. I watched it ring. Watched her name appear and disappear as the call went to voicemail. The next morning I woke up to a different world. I woke to the sound of my phone vibrating on the nightstand. Continuous angry buzzing like a trapped insect. I'd turned the ringer off but forgotten to silence it completely. The screen showed 93 unread text messages, 24 voicemails, 15 emails, marked urgent. I made coffee in the empty kitchen while my phone continued its angry dance on the counter. Through the window, the Wind River Range looked the same as it always did. White peaks against blue sky, indifferent to human drama. The snow from yesterday had stopped, leaving everything clean and frozen and perfect. I scrolled through the messages while the coffee brewed. A mix of family, colleagues I hadn't spoken to in years, journalists, people I barely remembered from projects in the 90s. Everyone suddenly very interested in talking to me. The news had spread beyond the Denver Post. National coverage now. Tech blogs, mining industry publications. I pulled up my laptop and searched my name. 68-year-old engineer disrupts mining industry. Wyoming rancher's basement innovation worth millions. Retirement project becomes nine-figure deal. There was even a photo. They'd pulled it from my Old Bailey Mechanical Solutions bio. Me in a hard hat and safety vest, standing in front of a massive excavator at some mine site I couldn't quite remember. I looked younger in the photo, confident, like a man who still believed his expertise mattered. The articles called me a pioneering innovator and a self-taught AI developer. They quoted Catherine Reed, saying the platform represented a paradigm shift in predictive maintenance technology. One journalist had tracked down James Peterson, who'd said I was one of the most brilliant engineers of our generation, and that my work would save the mining industry billions. I wondered if Michael and Rachel were reading these same articles, if they were finally understanding what their difficult old father had been building while they made jokes about teaching old dogs new tricks. Sarah's SUV pulled into the driveway at 2 in the afternoon. I watched from the living room window as she got out, moved slowly, like she'd aged a decade overnight. She'd left Jackson Hole early, driven 5 hours back through mountain passes and high plains to get here. She walked in without knocking, didn't call out a greeting, just came straight to where I was standing in the living room, still holding my coffee cup from 3 hours ago. David. She stood in the doorway between the kitchen and living room, wearing the sweater I'd bought her last Christmas. Navy blue merino wool from a catalog I'd spent an hour searching through, trying to find something she'd like. She'd thanked me politely, folded it carefully, put it away. I'd never seen her wear it. Until now. Why didn't you tell me? Her voice was quiet, controlled, but I could hear the fracture lines underneath. Tell you what? David, don't. She stopped, took a breath. Don't play games. The technology, the deal, any of it. Why didn't you tell me you were working on something so important? I looked at her. Really looked at her. 43 years of marriage, and I could still see the girl I'd met at the University of Wyoming. Still see the woman who'd helped me build this ranch, who'd raised our children, who'd stood beside me through decades of early mornings and late nights and all the grinding work of building a life together. But I could also see the woman who'd told her book club I was having a late life crisis, who'd decided I was too difficult to include in Christmas, who'd stopped asking me what I was working on because she'd already decided it didn't matter. Would you have been interested? I asked. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing came out. That's not fair, isn't it? When was the last time anyone in this family asked what I was working on? When was the last time anyone cared about my opinion unless it was to tell me I was wrong? You could have said something. Her voice had an edge now, defense creeping in. You could have told me you were building something real instead of just, what? I set my coffee cup down. Instead of just playing on the computer, having my late life crisis, going through a phase. She flinched, like I'd slapped her. I did say things, Sarah. I had opinions and ideas and thoughts, and everyone, including you, made it very clear those things weren't welcome anymore. She sat down on the couch, suddenly, like her legs had given out. She looked tired, more tired than I'd ever seen her. The kids feel terrible, she said quietly. I'm sure they do. Michael is devastated. He says he had no idea you were working on something so important. The bitterness rose in my throat like bile. He wouldn't have cared if he did know. 8 months ago, I mentioned I was learning to code. He laughed, made a joke about teaching old dogs new tricks. You were there. You heard him. He didn't mean, yes, he did. Rachel made jokes, too, about Grandpa and his computer games. And you, Sarah. I paused, making sure I had her eyes. You told people at your book club I was going through a phase, that I was having some kind of late-life crisis, playing on the computer instead of accepting retirement. Her face went pale. Someone told you that? Linda Morrison. She thought I should know. She also thought it was cruel. Sarah started crying. Not dramatically, just quiet tears running down her face while she sat there on our couch, wearing the sweater I'd bought her, surrounded by the Christmas decorations that he'd hung for a holiday I hadn't been invited to. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "For what, specifically?" She looked up at me, tears still flowing. "For not listening, for not taking you seriously, for thinking." Her voice broke. "For thinking you were just my old stubborn husband who couldn't adapt to how things are now, who couldn't accept that the world had moved on." "I am old," I said, "and stubborn, but I'm not obsolete. I never was." "No." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "You're not." We sat in silence for a long moment. The house creaked around us. Outside, snow was starting to fall again, soft flakes drifting past the windows. "What happens now?" she asked finally. "With us? With everything." I thought about the easy answer, the comforting lie that would smooth things over. Let us pretend the past year hadn't happened. Let us slide back into the comfortable dysfunction we'd built together. "The deal closes officially today," I said instead. "Frontier wants me to start consulting in January. They're talking about expansion, international markets, partnerships with major mining firms around the world. That's not what I meant." "I know." She looked at me, waiting. "Do you want to fix this?" I asked. "Do you want to fix us?" "Of course I—" "Let me finish." I kept my voice level. "I don't know if I do. I know I loved you for 43 years. I know we built a life together, raised 3 children, carved out something real on these 42 acres. But I don't know if I can go back to being the person you all wanted me to be. Quiet, agreeable, fading into the background so everyone else could feel more comfortable." Sarah's tears had stopped, but her face was pale, stricken. "We never wanted you to be anyone else," she said. "Yes, you did. You wanted me to be quieter, less opinionated, more agreeable. You wanted me to just nod and smile and stop having thoughts that didn't match everyone else's. Stop pointing out problems. Stop being difficult." She didn't argue. She couldn't, because we both knew it was true. Sarah was still sitting on the couch when headlights swept across the living room windows around 7 that evening. 2 vehicles pulling into the driveway, Michael's Subaru and Rachel's Tesla. They'd coordinated this, clearly. Probably spent the afternoon on the phone, rehearsing what they'd say, figuring out how to approach the father who'd suddenly become someone they didn't recognize. I heard their car doors slam in sync, footsteps on the porch, a knock, tentative, unsure, and then Sarah got up to let them in. They stood in the living room looking uncomfortable, like teenagers who'd been caught doing something wrong and were now facing the principal. Michael still had his Jackson Hole jacket on. Rachel was wearing the scarf I'd given her 2 Christmases ago, the one I'd thought she'd donated to Goodwill because I'd never seen her wear it. Everyone was suddenly wearing my gifts. "Dad," Michael started. His voice was careful, measured. "We owe you an apology. Multiple apologies." Rachel nodded, stepped closer. "We've been treating you like you didn't matter. Like your experience and your knowledge and your ideas were outdated. And we were wrong," Michael continued. "Completely wrong. About everything." I waited. Didn't help them. Didn't make this easier. They'd earned this discomfort. Rachel pulled out her phone. "I've been reading about it online, all afternoon. The articles are saying your platform could revolutionize mining safety and efficiency. One journalist called it the most innovative solution to come out of the American West in the last decade." "I don't care what journalists say," I said. That stopped them both. They exchanged a glance, that same glance they'd been exchanging over my head for the past year, the one that said, "Dad's being difficult again." "Then what do you care about?" Michael asked. I looked at both of them. My son, 39, who'd laughed when I said I was learning to code. My daughter, 35, who'd told her mother I was embarrassing her in front of her fiancé. Both of them standing in my living room because a news alert on their phones had finally forced them to see me. "I care about being respected," I said. "Not because I made money. Not because I built something that journalists think is impressive. But because I'm your father, and I've lived 68 years on this planet, and I might actually know some things worth listening to." They both nodded, chastened, like children being scolded. "I care about being part of a family that values me for who I am, not who they want me to be. I care about having conversations where my opinions aren't automatically dismissed because I'm old, or because I don't understand social media, or because I actually remember what happened the last time someone tried a scheme like carbon credit trading without proper regulation." Michael opened his mouth, closed it, then muttered, "The carbon market isn't a scheme." I raised an eyebrow. He smiled slightly, the first genuine expression I'd seen from him all evening. "Okay. Parts of it are definitely problematic. You were right about that." Rachel stepped forward. "Dad, can we start over? Not forget everything that's happened, but try to do better?" "That depends," I said. "Are you here because you respect me, or because I'm suddenly worth $9.5 million? The question hung in the air like smoke. Sarah made a small sound from the couch, a gasp or maybe a sob. But I kept my eyes on Michael and Rachel. Michael had the decency to think about it, really think about it. When he finally spoke, his voice was different. Honest, in a way it hadn't been in years. "Both," he said. "I mean, yes, the money made us realize we'd been idiots, made us see what we should have seen all along, but that doesn't make us wrong about being idiots. We were. And if it took this to wake us up, then I'm grateful it happened, even though I'm ashamed it was necessary." I appreciated the honesty, the admission without excuses. It didn't erase the past year, but it was something. "Here's what I need," I said. "I need space. Time to think. Time to figure out what I want from the rest of my life, which might be another 20 years, if I'm lucky. I'm not making any promises about family dinners, or Jackson Hole, or pretending everything is fine when it's not." "That's fair," Rachel said quietly. "And if we're going to rebuild this," I continued, It has to be real, not just everyone being nice because they're guilty or because they think I'm going to write them into my will. It has to be because we actually respect each other, listen to each other, value what each other brings to the table. Michael winced. We deserve that. Yes, I agreed. You do. They stayed for another hour. We sat in the living room, me in my chair, Sarah on the couch, Michael and Rachel perched on the edge of the love seat, like they weren't sure they were allowed to get comfortable. We talked, but not about the platform or the money or the news coverage. We talked about harder things, about the past year, about Thanksgiving dinner and Rachel's birthday party, and all the small cuts that had slowly severed us. Michael admitted he'd felt threatened by my criticisms of his work. I kept thinking, if you don't believe in what I'm doing, maybe I shouldn't believe in it either. So instead of listening, I just shut you out. Rachel said she'd been embarrassed. Brandon was so excited to talk to you about his business. When you pointed out the problems with his equipment, I felt like you were criticizing my judgment for being with him. Like you were saying I'd chosen wrong. I was criticizing his equipment, I said. Not you. Not your choice. Just the cheap Chinese panels that are going to fail and leave his customers with expensive repairs. She nodded slowly. I know that now. I should have known it then. They asked about the platform, what it did, how it worked, why I'd built it. I gave them the technical overview, watched their faces as they tried to understand the scope of what I'd created. Michael asked smart questions about implementation. Rachel wondered about the social impact on mining communities, about job displacement from automation. They were good questions, thoughtful questions, the kind of questions they should have been asking for the past 9 months. When they finally left, promises were made, intentions stated. Michael said he wanted to learn more about the platform, maybe find ways his sustainability work could complement it. Rachel said she'd like to understand the technology better, see if there were applications beyond mining. I walked them to the door, watched them drive away into the December night. Their taillights disappeared around the bend, leaving me and Sarah alone again in the house. That went better than I expected, Sarah said from the couch. I turned to look at her. They meant well, but I've learned enough in 68 years to know that intentions mean nothing without actions. Do you think they'll follow through? I don't know, maybe. Maybe not, but that's up to them now. I'm not going to beg for their attention anymore. Either they decide I'm worth their time and respect, or they don't. Sarah nodded slowly. She looked exhausted. We both were. I'm going to bed, she said, standing up. She paused at the foot of the stairs. Are you coming? I thought about it. About 43 years of sleeping beside her, of shared space and shared breath, and the comfortable intimacy of long marriage. About the past year of distance growing between us like frost on a window. In a while, I said, I have some things to finish in the basement. She nodded again like she'd expected that answer, maybe even deserved it. I watched her climb the stairs, heard her footsteps cross the bedroom floor above me. Then I went down to my workshop, to the kingdom I'd built while everyone else was deciding I didn't matter. Alone again. But this time it was by choice, not exclusion. And somehow that made all the difference. The weeks that followed were strange, surreal even. The story made national news. Not just mining industry publications, but mainstream media. NPR did a segment about innovation in unexpected places. The Wall Street Journal ran a feature titled, "The 68-Year-Old Disruptor." Interview requests flooded in. Business magazines, tech podcasts, even a producer from some entrepreneurship show wanting me to be a guest advisor. I declined most of them. I wasn't interested in being famous. I just wanted to work. Frontier Industrial Ventures set me up with an office in downtown Denver, 20th floor of a glass tower with views of the Rocky Mountains. Nothing fancy, just a space where I could meet with the development team they'd assembled. 12 engineers, most of them half my age, all of them brilliant in ways that made me feel both inadequate and energized. They'd been hired to expand the platform, to take what I'd built in my basement and transform it into something deployable across the global mining industry. I was involved in all major decisions: architecture choices, feature prioritization, deployment strategies. Catherine Reed made it clear this was still my platform, my vision. They were just helping me build it bigger. For the first time in years, maybe decades, I felt truly alive. Not content, not comfortable, alive, the way I'd felt when I was 30 and believed I could solve any problem if I just worked hard enough. In January, Sarah suggested therapy, her idea, which surprised me. "I think we need help," she said one morning over coffee. "Professional help, to figure out if we can fix this." Dr. Kapoor's office was in Cheyenne, a converted Victorian house with comfortable chairs and artwork that was probably supposed to be calming. We went every Thursday evening, driving the hour each way in silence, then spending 50 minutes trying to untangle 43 years of marriage. "When did you start feeling unheard?" Dr. Kapoor asked me during our third session. I thought about it. Really thought about it. Gradually, maybe 10 years ago. The kids were adults, making their own lives. Sarah got busier with her activities. My job became routine. I think everyone just stopped seeing me as someone who was still growing, still changing. I became fixed in their minds. This unchanging figure who'd always be exactly as I was. And how did that feel? Like dying, slowly, like being erased one conversation at a time. Sarah was crying again. She'd been crying a lot in therapy, quiet tears that she tried to hide behind tissues Dr. Kapoor kept in a carved wooden box on the side table. "I didn't know," she said. "I thought you were happy, content. I thought so too for a while. But content isn't the same as fulfilled." The work continued, both the therapy and the platform. Both required patience, attention, willingness to examine things I'd rather leave buried. In February, Michael called, asked if he could drive up to the ranch, said he had something to show me. He arrived on a Saturday with a laptop and a nervous energy I remembered from when he was young and excited about something. We sat in the kitchen, the same table where Sarah had uninvited me from Christmas 3 months earlier, and he pulled up a presentation. "I've been thinking," he said, "about your platform and my work, about how they might complement each other." My first instinct was to say no, to protect what I'd built, keep it separate from family complications, avoid another situation where I'd have to watch my work be dismissed or misunderstood. But then I remembered what I'd told them. Actions matter more than intentions. "Let's see your proposal," I said. It was good, really good. He'd done his homework, identified market gaps where sustainability consulting and predictive maintenance intersected. Mining companies were under increasing pressure to reduce their environmental impact. My platform could help them maintain equipment more efficiently, reduce waste, minimize the environmental footprint of operations. Michael had created projections, identified potential clients, even drafted marketing strategies. We spent 3 months developing it together, meeting every weekend, video calls during the week, iterating on the business model. Working alongside my son, I rediscovered parts of him I'd forgotten. He was smart, creative, genuinely talented at understanding market dynamics. More importantly, he listened now, really listened, not just waiting for his turn to talk, but actually hearing what I said and building on it. In May, we presented the idea to Frontier Industrial Ventures. Catherine loved it. By July, Michael was heading up a new division focused on expanding the platform into precious metals mining, where environmental regulations were strictest and the demand for efficient operations highest. Rachel took a different approach. She came to me in March with an idea about applying social work principles to the platform. Mining operations impacted communities, displaced people, changed economies, created environmental hazards. What if the platform could help companies not just maintain equipment, but also track and mitigate social impacts? We created an advisory board. Rachel chaired it. Her insights about community engagement transformed how Frontier approached deployment, especially in developing countries where mining operations often cause the most disruption. Sarah started taking computer classes at the community college in Cheyenne. She said she wanted to understand what I'd been doing in the basement all those months. She'd never be a programmer. She struggled with basic Python syntax and got frustrated with debugging, but she learned enough to have informed conversations about the work. More importantly, she started asking questions again. Real questions. Interested questions. The kind of questions that assumed I might know something she didn't. Christmas arrived. 1 year after I'd spent the holiday alone in the ranch house, working in my basement while my family gathered at Jackson Hole without me. This time, we went together, all of us, Sarah and me, Michael and his new girlfriend, a mining engineer named Jennifer, who'd heard about the platform and wanted to discuss practical applications. Rachel and Brandon, who'd spent 6 months restructuring his solar company based on my recommendations. The equipment was better now, actually sustainable. The grandkids running through the lodge, oblivious to the complicated adult reconciliations happening around them. On Christmas Eve, after dinner, Michael asked me to step outside. We stood on the deck overlooking the snow-covered valley, the Tetons rising like cathedrals in the moonlight, our breath visible in the cold mountain air. "Dad, I need to tell you something." "All right." He was quiet for a moment, looking out at the mountains. Then, "Last Christmas, when Mom told you not to come, I was relieved. I thought it would be easier without you there. Less tense, less complicated." He paused. I waited. It was the worst Christmas of my life. "Michael, no, let me finish. It wasn't just that you weren't there. It was that we'd made you not be there. And the whole time I kept thinking about all the times I'd rolled my eyes or changed the subject when you gave advice. All the times I treated you like an obligation instead of someone who loved us and wanted to help." He was crying now. My 39-year-old son, tears freezing on his cheeks in the December cold. "The platform. That's impressive. It changed my life professionally and financially. But it's not why I'm sorry. I'm sorry because even if you'd never built that platform, even if you just stayed retired and worked on your projects, you still deserved better than what we gave you. I pulled him into a hug. He sobbed against my shoulder, the way he hadn't done since he was 8 years old and had fallen off his bike, convinced the scraped knee meant he'd never walk again. "I forgive you," I said. "But more than that, I'm proud of you for recognizing it, for changing, for being willing to do better." When he'd composed himself, he asked, "Are you happy, Dad? Now, with everything?" I thought about it. The platform, the money, the recognition, the family healing, all of it was good, all of it important. But the real answer was simpler. "I'm not invisible anymore," I said. "That's what makes me happy, being seen." Through the window I could see Sarah laughing with Rachel. Christmas tree lights reflected off wine glasses. It looked like something from a commercial, like someone's ideal of family togetherness. But it wasn't ideal. It was real, messy, complicated, still healing from wounds that went deep, but real. And that, I'd learned, was worth more than any dollar amount frontier industrial ventures could offer. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat by the fireplace with my laptop. I was working on a new project, an extension of the platform for infrastructure maintenance, predicting problems in bridges and roads before they became critical. I hadn't told anyone yet. Maybe I would, maybe I wouldn't. But this time it wasn't because I felt invisible. It was because I'd learned something valuable. I didn't need external validation to know my work mattered. I didn't need anyone's permission to keep growing, learning, building. At 68, I was just getting started. My phone buzzed. A text from James Peterson. "Saw the quarterly numbers. Your platform is exceeding every projection. You've built something special, David. Merry Christmas." I smiled, set the phone aside. The fire crackled. Snow fell outside. My family slept upstairs in a lodge that had almost lost me for good. But I was still here, still working, still building, still proving that obsolete was a word that didn't apply to someone who refused to stop growing. The real victory, I thought, wasn't the money, or the recognition, or even the family healing. The victory was knowing I'd spent 68 years becoming someone worth listening to, and finally learning to believe it.